meeting. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the regular council meeting of Tuesday, October 1st, 2024. I would like to start by recognizing that we are gathering and governing on what is now known as the Comox territory. And we, after spending the day in reflection yesterday, continue to be extremely grateful for their care and stewardship of this land since time immemorial, and their ongoing collaboration with us as governors in these lands, on these lands. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you, and that's carried. Minutes, Committee of the Whole, September 9th, regular council meeting, September 9th.
Move minutes. Second.
Thank you. All in favor? And receipt of the draft committee minutes, Heritage Committee, August 15th, and Advisory Planning Commission, September 12th.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. And all in favor? Thank you. And our first item is a delegation, which is more of a thank you and some words of appreciation for the recipient of the King Charles III Coronation Medal, Megan Kersons. Can you come and sit so it's not weird for me to talk to the audience?
Nothing about this that isn't going to be weird.
Keeping Cumberland weird. That's
So some of you may have seen recently that there is a thing called the Coronation Medal, and this medal was started when His Majesty King Charles was coronated. Thank you. And so it's called the Coronation Medal. It's already awkward. And so there are several of these medals made, and people can apply, particularly members of the legislature can apply to give one of the medals out. So our MLA, Josie Osborne, nominated Megan, and she was quite thrilled to have it approved. And Megan, being Megan, was like, yeah, that's great, thanks. We'll just do it up at the school and no big deal. And then when I was away at the time, and thankfully Acting Mayor Councillor Tyrion was able to attend, but I thought we should recognize this more formally because it's our village that this amazing human habitates in and creates community in. So I just have a few words. And yeah, so I've known Megan for a very long time, and ever since I've known Megan, she has been someone who steps forward when there's a space. So whether it's a market day that needs some rejuvenation, or a 125th anniversary that needs some community building energy, she has always been an instigator, a community builder, a gatherer of people and resources, and she helps this village do far more than we could without her. Whether it's volunteering on a village committee, I don't even want to try and list them, but I'm gonna. So currently sitting on the Heritage Committee, but has also sat on the Economic Development Steering Committee and the Advisory Planning Committee, and that's it. And also participates in the roundtable. Wherever there is a need or an opportunity to contribute, she stands. She is an avid arts and culture producer, promoter, and advocate, a local historian, and initiates arts and culture events that transform this community and bring us together. So we are all very lucky to have her enthusiasm and commitment in our village, and we just wanted to thank you in a kind of more official setting, and give you an opportunity to say something, and any other members of council as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. It has been a long ride, one that I hope will continue for a very, very long time. It is not, I am so grateful, and it is also not lost on me the irony that that this acknowledgement of service is tied to work that for me is deeply connected to decolonizing and undoing impacts of colonization on the lands and within the cultural landscape that we live. And so in some ways I feel it's a both and. You can feel some discomfort. So I feel some discomfort and at the same time feel a huge amount of gratitude to live at a time when one can dedicate themselves to work that is about social justice, decolonizing the landscape, taking the land back from private industry, returning things to the commons, healing relationships, that work could be something that's recognized in such a highly colonial context, gives me a both and. So I'm filled with gratitude to be here right now in this community with all of you, doing all the things that we're all doing. And I love this place so dearly. And I love that we can collectively hold even some humor or irony in this, but be grateful that we live in a time where that is the activity that's being recognized over things that continue to do harm to people and the land. So I am really grateful that you took this extra step. I didn't know what to do with it before. It was like being handed something and not knowing what to do with it. And I'm very grateful for your acknowledgement and your leadership. And thank you, Vicki.
You're welcome. Does anybody else have something?
You don't have to.
Everyone's looking at me. I don't think I could say anything better than either one of you guys have both said, other than the fact that I'm a friend and a fan. I'm a friend and a fan, and I look forward to working with you long into the future, and it would not be the same place here without you. So thank you for everything you do.
I got a pen.
Yes.
A village pen. I have all kinds of things my daughter can now inherit. Thank you kindly and for taking time out of your agenda. Oh, God. Thank you. I'm going to stay for geothermal. I'm interested.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you, Megan.
Okay. Next up is Adam Spiegel and Danica Lawson, owners of 2815 Maryport Avenue, regarding an easement. Come on up. You're welcome to sit or stand, whatever you like, Adam.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, thanks for having me here today. Before I get started, I'd like all of you just to take a moment and pause and think about the last time you walked down one of the alleys in Cumberland. I think you can all agree it's a very unique experience. It's part of the attraction of Cumberland, and it certainly was part of the attraction for me and my family to relocate here. Now, it's not just the laneways themselves, but it's the structures that line the laneways that I would argue contribute to the richness of the laneway experience. The structures, much like mine, were built in a time when individual homeowners were very resourceful. They took it upon themselves to just build. And as a legacy of that, we've inherited a unique experience as you walk down these laneways, or as you, like me, are a homeowner. So we've inherited this, and I bring this up because I want to kind of weave the richness of the laneway experience with, and that legacy of these structures that line the laneways with the challenges of modernizing the village today. So with that context in mind, in March of 2024, we began a restoration project for our existing garage. It's 288 square feet, 12 by 24 feet. What began with us expecting to install a new steel roof and reside the garage quickly expanded when we discovered that much of the building structure, like many of the structures on these laneways, was rotten and going to collapse. We had the interior restructured from the inside out in an attempt to restore the frame of the structure. And while the contractors were on site, we opted to remove the garage door and install 2 small windows, both frosted for privacy, and 2 skylights into the roof. My wife works remotely from home, and we'd like to be able to use the garage as an office for her and a place to shower when we come back from muddy mountain bike rides. In late March 2024, we were hit with a stop work notice due to the reframing of our garage, the installation of 2 windows, and the roughing in of a bathroom, which has been framed. We note that the footprint of the garage has not changed from the original structure, nor the roof line. The only new windows installed are frosted, as I mentioned. Our garage is over the property line and encroaches into the laneway by a maximum of 1.9 feet. So maximum of 1.9 feet, minimum 1.7 feet. It's been in this location for approximately 50 years. In our opinion, it contributes to the character of the laneway and the village look and feel. The garage is on a corner lot, and therefore there's ample room for public works and emergency personnel to access the laneway if they need to. We've been unable to find a resolution to our stop work notice, working with staff, and we are unable to afford removing the garage, and can't fathom the cost of building a new carriage house with the appropriate setbacks. Moving the garage is unfeasible to allow for the appropriate setbacks as per bylaws, and we cannot justify landfilling a perfectly usable structure in good environmental conscience. We intend to now pull a building permit to allow for the completion of the project, which will result in us having an office in the garage and a bathroom for post-mountain bike cleanup. As the structure is encroaching in the laneway, an easement will be required for the issuance of a building permit to allow for our garage to remain in its current form and function. Since we are going through the approval process now, we are curious as to whether the village would support an ADU designation on the garage structure. This would give us more flexibility in the future in the event that my wife no longer requires a home office, and would help the village to achieve its goals of densification and providing more affordable housing in the community, which, as we all know, is sorely lacking. The potential to possibly provide long-term rental housing at some point in the future appeals to us given the massive needs that exist for affordable rental housing in Cumberland. In summary, Council, there will be an application in front of you, hopefully at the October 28th Council meeting, that myself and my wife, Danica Lawson, the owners of 2815 Maryport, have submitted to staff. Council is being asked to consider the materiality of a 1.9 foot encroachment onto a laneway of a garage which has existed for 50 years, with no material alterations to the exterior being proposed. Part of the richness and identity of Cumberland includes the unique laneways and alleys that line our community. As residents of Cumberland, we have inherited many garages and laneway structures that are the legacy of times past, when lot lines were not as evident as they are today. I hope Council will consider the impact of losing the legacy laneway structures versus allowing a homeowner like myself to restore the structure that exists to its previous state and to improve it to provide additional usable space for both working, family, and housing. Restoring rather than building new for the sake of ensuring bylaws are met will result in building materials being diverted from the landfill in Cumberland. In our opinion, if Council considers the heritage, cultural, social, and environmental benefits of our proposal, they will work towards the approval of the easement and the development permit for 2815 Maryport. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. So as you know, we don't make decisions on delegations, and so your application will come hopefully on the 28th, and we'll have a decision there. I will give council an opportunity for questions if anybody has clarifying questions.
Just one quick one.
Sure.
What's it sitting on right now? What kind of footings and?
Yeah, it's slab on grade.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant slab. There was, yeah, it's like probably 3 feet deep at certain points. I think at one point, whoever constructed it was a backyard mechanic, and so there's a dugout where they used to probably just let the oil drop into the ground.
Potentially. And the encroachment is the whole building or the roof line or,
It's, well, so the whole structure technically, as a result of 1.9 feet of one of the points of the
oh,
structure.
okay. Okay,
Oh, and that, and the slab itself is out into the alley.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
So there's a motion there to receive that delegation.
I'll move that council receive the delegation of the owners of 2815 Maryport regarding the easement and development application for the garage.
Second.
Thank you, and all in favor? That's carried unanimously. Beaufort Family Health Society request for extension to the bridge funding agreement. Is anybody going to speak to it, or do we just want to talk about it?
So the Director of Community Services and myself have been meeting with community groups, and we started with these two because Council approved bridge funding to both of these organizations, the Beaufort Family Health Society and Cumberland Community School Society for the Food Share Program. You approved $10,000 each for 2023 and 2024. So 2024 it would be ending. So we met with them to discuss this and to let to make sure that they were aware of it, which they were. And during both those meetings, they were different meetings. They indicated that they needed some more help for longer than the 2 years, and their option was to write to council to ask. So staff believe, considering you're going to be thinking about your budgeting coming up for the next 3 Mondays or so, that these could be taken to those meetings and so you can look at everything holistically.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So there's a recommendation there if nobody has questions.
I'll move that council refer the correspondence from the Beaufort Family Health Society requesting extension to the bridge funding agreement to the Budget Committee of the Whole meeting scheduled for October 7th, 15th, and 21st, 2024 for consideration in the 2025-2029 financial plan.
Thank you. Seconded?
Second?
Thank you, and all in favor? And that is carried unanimously. And there's a second one there from Cumberland Community Schools, assuming the same.
I will move the council refer the correspondence from the Cumberland Community School Society requesting an extension to the bridge funding agreement to the Budget Committee of the Whole meeting scheduled for October 7th, 15th, and 21st, 2021 for consideration in the 2025-2029 financial plan.
Thank you. Seconder?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Okay. Next up is Accelerating Community Energy Transformation ACET Geothermal Project presentation. Come on up, Zach.
Sweet.
Yeah. And so I'm just going to introduce Zachary. He'll give you some more information about himself, but council has approved this work to move forward, the feasibility work, and Zachary from ACET is going to be presenting to you on what he has learned so far and his process. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle and Mayor Brown, and thank you to Council for the opportunity to present tonight and to conduct this research. My name is Dr. Zachary Gould. As mentioned, I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Institute for Integrated Energy Systems at the University of Victoria, and I'm working with the Accelerating Community Energy Transformation Initiative, which is a mouthful, but also known as the ACET initiative at the university, to participate in this mine water geo-exchange research exploration in the village of Cumberland. So first of all, I do want to acknowledge the Sathlut, Sasitla, Ayaksan, Hahe, and Pentlatch people as the traditional custodians of the territory where we stand. I recognize the importance of their historical and ongoing connections to the land, water, air, food, and energy that this village consumes, and I pay respect to all the knowledge traditions interwoven in the Comox First Nation and to all of their elders past, present, and future. I did want to take some time to put some thought into this given the timing of this meeting, and also just say that I know nothing can undo the harm of the residential school system, but I really do feel that this project could be an opportunity to take some of the colonial wounds of extraction here in the coal mines underneath this village and transform them into a shared community resource that can help propel the community towards a more resilient future. So a brief agenda, I'll go a little deeper into an introduction. I'll recap very rapidly some of the engagement with stakeholders and previous projects that I've done so far. I'll talk about where we are now, what the system and what the opportunity looks like or could look like here in Cumberland. And then lastly, I'll review some requests from village staff and make some recommendations for next steps. So as mentioned, ACET is an initiative at the University of Victoria. They have many goals. The overarching goal is to propel Canada towards exceeding net zero emissions goals, so really thinking about carbon negative solutions that can be implemented in partnership with communities. And most importantly here, I added the last one, which is listening to those communities and kind of getting a sense of how we can use energy projects to propel solutions to other community needs and real needs that are voiced within that community. So just briefly, a technical overview. I know many of you have probably heard about geothermal systems in general. When I talk about this project, I use the words mine water geo-exchange, and that's chosen intentionally. Geo-exchange suggests there's opportunity for both heating and cooling because it is a low temperature system. So we're hovering right around 10, 11 degrees Celsius. So we're cutting the difference between temperatures you'd need to heat homes in the winter and cool them in the summertime. And currently we are looking most seriously into an open loop distributed system. There are other types of systems. Most traditional geothermal that you might think of would be a closed loop directly into the ground. In this case, we're looking to actually pull mine water up from the mines, run it through a heat exchanger, and then inject it right back into the mine. So none of that mine water has to interact with any of the mechanicals. We're just pulling a little bit of that thermal energy out. And then in the case of a distributed system, there's a low temperature 10 to 11 degree loop that would distribute that warmer water throughout the district energy system within the village. And each building in that case would have its separate loop with its own separate heat pumps. Happy to answer more technical questions on that at the end. So briefly to review the engagement we've done so far, first and foremost, we have contacted the Comox First Nation and corresponded with their staff. So far, the outcomes of that are that any invasive explorations whatsoever that might happen in the future would require a cultural monitor to be in place. So that's well noted, and we are actively pursuing further engagement to discuss mutual project benefit, their interests, and also the opportunities that might exist for them to share some of the benefits of this project. We came here, I came with a couple of my colleagues in mid-June for Miners Memorial Weekend. We talked with many, many people, met with many people, heard music and other beautiful things, beautiful stories of the history here, especially related to the mines and the labor movement. I also followed up with people from community organizations, and the overwhelming consensus, as will be no surprise, was that Cumberland needs affordability. So when I hear that coming from an energy perspective, I have to start thinking a little more creatively. We're not going to directly bring down the cost of housing in Cumberland, but I do think there might be an opportunity to bring down the cost of energy collectively and then to share those benefits more broadly with people living in the homes and other people who have lived here and continue to live here. So I also visited several facilities across British Columbia and the oldest operating facility in Canada out in Spring Hill, Nova Scotia. And I learned many things, which I'm happy to go into more detail at the end and address with questions. But I just want to highlight the Dr. Carson and Marion Maury Community Center in Spring Hill, Nova Scotia is currently an ice rink cooled with the geothermal resource. and they're looking into using the waste heat from that operation to run a greenhouse locally. It's where they host all their farmers markets in town. So I thought that was a really cool overlap, given that we're also looking at potential applications here in the center of town. And this is the system just down the road in Nanaimo that I visited about a month ago and met with the engineer, Jeff Quibel from Falcon Engineering, who designed and implemented their mine water geoexchange system at Vancouver Island University. So in terms of where we are now and what we're looking at in Cumberland, I think many of you will recognize this map. This is from 2022, so a little bit outdated. We are standing here at Council Chambers, and as many of you know, we are directly on top of mine number 6. And this is the outline of coal seam number 1, which is the upper seam in mine number 6. So the first kind of exercise that we did as a group, and this was with a lot of help from local geologists, some of whom are here today, and the Cascade Institute based in Colwood, Royal Roads University, South Island. And we basically took the aerial extent, the area of mine number 6, and multiplied it by the average low and high width of coal seam number 1. And that gave us kind of a rough idea of how much volume there might be within that coal seam number 1 when it was excavated. Then we immediately took 50% off to assume a lot of rocks caved in, a lot of structure, room and pillars, etc. might have been left in there when it was excavated. And then multiplied it through a standard heat transfer equation to get an initial capacity estimate. And I really want to qualify this, that this is with a lot of remaining uncertainty, but just to give everyone a rough sense of what we're talking about, almost 10,000 gigajoules of thermal energy. And that's very conservatively enough to heat 110 average BC households. So again, that's assuming several things. I can go into more detail about that, but that's kind of like a good minimum base case conservative estimate for just mine number 6, just coal seam number 1. So we're here. The other thing we're blessed to have in Cumberland is a archive, and Raj Ship and the Cumberland Museum and Archive that have kept track of many of the records from the Dunsmuir operations over time. And we have these lists of boreholes. In this case, the geologists I mentioned with helped translate the depth down from each of these existing boreholes to the very top surface of coal seam number 1. And we use that to translate into basically a topographic map of the top layer of that coal seam. So this would be, if you look at that orange dot where we're standing now and you compare it to the map on the right, or here I have some contour lines marked out as well, we're about 75 meters directly on top of coal seam number 1 where we stand right now. So this is useful for many reasons, but particularly in starting to define next steps and how we might go about testing the resource and feasibility of a project like this would be to continue this mapping process. But if we know where there's shallower access to the seams and where those seams are wider in breadth, we have a much better chance of actually being able to tap into them with a test well affordably without digging too deep and without missing, because things shift a lot over time. And so that's the first big benefit of having mapped the top of the coal seam number 1 in this way. And then also we can start thinking about, in relationship to future development and other town and village goals over time, how we might position those test wells so that we could ultimately use them as production and injection wells in an operating system down the line. So that brings up kind of what the potential pilot phase project could look like. And I want to once again emphasize this is purely conceptual, but I wanted to apply kind of this open loop distributed mindset to what we have here in front of us where we're standing. And the mayor and her team have brought up that there's a proposal for a thriving public precinct where we stand, which could include this block and some of the land north of Dunsmuir. And that's outlined and hatched in white right here. So if you think about that, that proposed precinct as a potential conceptual pilot project that would be heated and cooled with a geothermal resource, then you could think about an open loop system with a pump house down at the bottom of First Street, pulling water up from a production well all the way at the north, kitty-cornered from the weird church, and then injecting mine water back into an injection well somewhere in mine number 6 Park, and running it through a heat exchanger there, and that warmer water could be run through an ambient loop that works its way up and down First Street and potentially extends as there's demand and desire over time up east and west along Dunsmuir to meet the needs of other buildings. So the biggest question that remains at this time is kind of what does this conceptual demand side look like? Because before we can really take steps to energy modeling and understanding what the mechanical system could look like, we would definitely need a little bit more definition about if there's going to be a pool, if there might be an ice rink, how many affordable housing units might be included in a proposed development. And I know those things are still way down the line, but one of my requests is that to the extent possible, we can be engaged with the planning department and other village stakeholders to kind of brainstorm and ideate about what this proposed pilot scale project might look like, especially on the demand side, and how we can equitably utilize this shared resource in the village. And alongside that, I think another request is that we start looking for grants that address specifically feasibility oriented studies and technical studies on the land. And I would request a degree of support in preparation and administration of those grants if and when they come up and come to fruition. And that might include considering a range of possible matching funds at some point and or in-kind contributions and the timelines for those possible contributions when we identify a grant that would make sense to take us to the next step. And so far, in terms of a concluding recommendation, I have identified one specific grant that seems to be extremely well suited to take us through this next feasibility stage and really kind of take engineering and geological support to the next level to make sure that we can do all the proper feasibility tests and all the proper risk assessments with professionals, and also address some of these remaining uncertainties that I mentioned in this initial site feasibility analysis. So I think there's a grant that exists that is well suited, and the request alongside that would be eventually to submit a pre-application to the Green Municipal Fund to see if they're interested in funding something like this that could help us look towards 2025 as an opportunity to start drilling some initial test wells in appropriate places with Comox First Nation approval and monitoring, so that we can really explore the full potential of this resource and emphasize those discussions of how we can equitably distribute it amongst all those who live here. So thank you very much, and with that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Thank you so much. Questions, council?
I just had one question, just more of a technical question.
Yeah.
So when you have your ambient loop and folks are further downstream with their building heat exchanger, do you get a degradation as you get towards the end of the line of efficiency, or is it, how do you maintain
You
that?
could, but it would likely be buried, so you'd have that thermal insulation from the ground, and because it's ambient, it will likely maintain those temperatures that are similar to ground temperatures anyway.
Okay,
So
so
we're
we
not
don't
trying
take
to-
all the heat out at, the first building and then
Yeah.
the next building. You'd have kind of a uniform
Yeah,
distribution.
so there is a related concern and opportunity to that, which I mentioned in some of these lessons from other facilities. Heat pump loops like this can benefit extraordinarily from diverse loads. So if one building connected is heating while another one is cooling,
Yeah.
basically you're getting free energy out of the system because the temperature at the end of those two connections would return to what it started at. But if you have a whole line of connections that are heating, there is much more of a risk that you would end up with a degraded resource at the end of that line. And ultimately, then you'd be depending on the exchange in the mine with the surface of rocks touching the mine water reservoir to recharge that resource over time, which is not impossible, but certainly isn't ideal if we can design the demand side intelligently to try to balance those loads as best as we can.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. We've been looking forward to this report and seeing if this is possible for us for a really long time. So this is really nice to see this coming forward. And municipally, things happen usually backwards. So this coming way ahead of our future development seems like we're putting the cart in front of the horse for maybe the first time. So I'm optimistically positive about the future here. So thanks for that.
I appreciate that, and one of my biggest concerns was, is it too far in front of the horse?
This is right on time.
But yeah, I do recommend that kind of as those discussions with planning and stakeholder engagement start happening, that this be part of the conversation. And as much as we and I and ASET are welcome to participate in those conversations, we'd be thrilled to kind of inform that development and design process so that it's well suited for something like this when the time is right.
So, thank you for that. I guess my question is sort of a return on investment question. Is there so this is, what did you say, 10,000 kilojoules is the
10,000 gigajoules,
Gigajoules
thermal. Yeah.
of thermal energy, and that's sufficient to make it worthwhile? There's enough energy there that it makes it worthwhile to invest in a plant of, like, how much is it? How much are we looking at in infrastructure costs?
Yeah. I wish I had a perfect number for you. I would have included that. I think the main advice I got from Vancouver Island University and their engineers was that you have to go through the feasibility process first more completely to get a sense of, okay, this system might be this large and might cost this much.
Okay.
That being said, I think the pilot scale on its own, especially if it's only catering to the proposed municipal development, would be very unlikely to match a purely private return on investment. Like a private investor, I don't think would be attracted to building that infrastructure to meet the demand of 2 buildings.
Yeah.
However, this pilot scale is an essential process to saying, okay, we can sustain utilizing this resource and pumping water at the required rates over time, and we're not seeing the temperature dip too low after so many years of operation, then it's worth looking at the other seam number 4 and mine number 6. It's worth looking at mine number 5, and it's worth really thinking, like, where can we utilize this for the needs of the village in many different ways moving out to 2050 and beyond. So then I think it makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
And I want to also qualify that I do think that there's quite a bit of municipal and other grant public funding dollars available that could get the village well through this feasibility stage. And ASET is also an opportunity to source some of those matching funds, because they could, in theory, pay for the research side of things. And I'm pretty confident, depending on the grant, that could count as a matching contribution in most cases. So I think there's a good opportunity to leverage public dollars to get through that feasibility stage and hopefully have more of an ROI discussion at that point.
Okay, thank you very much. And then, so so a big part of that then is making sure that there isn't a degradation of the temperature,
Yeah.
and making it so that it's a renewable resource at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. There's the groundwater and the contact between the mine water reservoir and the surrounding rocks that would need to recharge a resource if it's unbalanced.
Yeah.
And then there's the demand side exercise of trying to balance heating and cooling demands as best we can continuously to limit the reliance on that resource. Because there will always be uncertainty about exactly what the mines look like under the ground, especially because there's very little access at the moment, ways to get down there. We do have Gwyneth who has chimed in and offered a lot of her knowledge. But I don't think we'll have a good sense of that. The other essential phase of the feasibility testing would be to get a better sense of how connected all this water is, because we have this massive reservoir, but if they're, like you can see how it gets pretty shallow and pretty narrow at different parts, there's a good chance that it's not all connected hydraulically, in which case the total resource in this coal seam would be less. So that's why we would drill, when we get to that phase, drill multiple test wells at different parts of the resource, and then we can drop a pressure sensor down there while we're pumping water out of one well, and we can see if there's a change in pressure
I see.
way up top. That would suggest strongly that those are hydraulically connected, and that water would reheat throughout the entire mine over time.
Thank you.
So in some ways, the bigger the mass of water, the better, because it's going to hold the temperature better.
Absolutely, yeah. Thermal inertia.
Yeah. Of course, thermal inertia.
How did you not know that?
Just along those lines, like based on VIU's use, did they see any kind of thermal drop as they used some of that, or what's a carrying capacity or do you have any idea? I know it's early,
In
but
Nanaimo, I haven't been made aware of any drops, and when we visited there, the system was operating in good condition. And also in Spring Hill, where they built the system in the late 80s, early 90s, they're still seeing good temperatures and sustained temperatures. So it can definitely work, but the steps need to be in place to kind of
Yeah.
gradually explore the resource and make sure that we have a good chance of it recharging over time.
thank you. That was very exciting.
Yeah, it is. Go ahead, Michelle.
So, barring like that, we're probably not going to have an ice rink. Maybe we will. but, just in case.
Whoa,
Just in
whoa,
case. Sorry,
whoa,
sorry. Just in case.
Nothing's off the table.
That's a different discussion.
Will the feasibility study actually, so we can understand both heating and cooling, so that we can keep would the feasibility study think of other ways that we could actually,
Yeah,
that'll
absolutely.
come out of that?
I would love, in an ideal world, to have that kind of liberty to imagine, in conjunction with planning and stakeholder engagement here, what different configurations could look like.
Yeah.
A greenhouse, heating a greenhouse through
Right.
the winter, for example, is a good way to diversify loads. And there's other pools, things like that. I know that might not be on the table.
Grocery
But
store.
Grocery store is a good
Right.
constant
a lot of cooling.
refrigeration load. So there's different creative ways, and we could kind of put together different options of, well-balanced loads that correlate to different end uses in the proposed development.
Thank you.
Awesome. I think that's all the questions. So thank you so much for being here and, and just taking us to the next steps. And we've got that group of slides so council can see the requests and the follow-up needs. Awesome.
Great.
Thanks
Thank
so
you
much, Zach.
Very exciting.
Appreciate your time.
Very exciting. Okay, so there's probably a recommendation to receive that presentation.
Move that council receive the presentation of Zachary Gould, ASET, regarding research into geothermal energy generation from Cumberland coal mines.
Second.
Second, and all in favor, and that is carried unanimously. Cumberland Housing Needs Report. Hello, Courtney.
Hello. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Karen Zaway, so I'm presenting this report. So this report presents the final Village of Cumberland Housing Needs Report from September. Council received a presentation from the consultants at the last council meeting. Completion of a housing needs report is a provincial requirement prior to adoption of a new official community plan, which we are currently working on. Recent updates to the Local Government Act require housing needs reports to make population and housing needs projections for the next 20 years, in addition to the previously required 5-year projections. Interim housing needs report must be completed by January 1st, 2025. Because the village was already planning to undertake this housing needs report as background for our OCP review, we have more than met this requirement. The updates to the Local Government Act also require OCPs to include policy language and map designations to respond to the projected 20-year housing demand, and OCPs must be updated by December 31st, 2025 to do so. This is in the work plan for 2025, and you will see this reflected in budget information at your budget meeting soon. Because the consultants made their presentation at the last meeting, I'll just highlight some very overarching messages from this housing needs report tonight. The report shows that the gap between what can be afforded by the median income and the median purchase price of housing continues to widen. It shows that housing is needed across the spectrum, from deeply subsidized to rental to affordable home ownership, and in different forms from large to small units. In one of its summary statements, the report says as follows: as a small but rapidly growing urban area, Cumberland's focus will be to provide a diversity of housing, especially rental apartments, secondary suites and accessory dwelling units, condominiums and townhouses, to meet the needs of its residents at all stages of their life. So the recommendation in this report is to accept the housing needs report, which will then fulfill the provincial requirement.
Thanks, Courtney. Questions or comments, anyone?
Maybe you pulled out the quote that I was going to quote. So if we can just keep that lens.
It was also highlighted in mine.
Yeah, it's definitely like that is an amazing way to sum up how we need to move forward. So if we can use that lens only, that would be great. So I really appreciated that report. Very comprehensive. Thank you.
Anybody else?
No, I think we covered most of it in the last two times this was in
Yeah.
council.
All right, I'll move that council accept the Village of Cumberland Housing Needs Report, September 2024.
Seconder. Thank you. All in favor and none opposed. That's carried. Traffic calming update. And Joel's away too. Come on up, Rob.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Joel is away today, so I'll be presenting a couple of reports on his behalf. So back in July, Council asked staff to come back with some quick fix ideas for traffic calming on Maryport Avenue, Kendall Avenue, and the west end of Dunsmuir Avenue. So staff are at this point really recommending well, there are some quick fix ideas, we believe, for Camp Road, and there's probably some short-term quick fix ideas for Kendall Avenue, as kind of noted in the report on the second page. But there's some challenges around implementing some of the recommendations in the TMP without some further work. And so anytime you make some major changes to a street, including intersection changes, major sign entrance changes, and even road marking, there really needs to be a bit of engineering behind it. And the reason for this is really, it boils down to liability. So if you have an engineer that's stamped off, and I want to say like a traffic circle design, so it would be like a standard drawing that you could use in various locations, but there's design, there's thought put into it, and you know it's defensible in court if there was some kind. So it's really protection for the village, and so really what we're recommending is we spend a bit of time to develop some of these engineered standards that we can then use to implement longer term shared street visions and the other traffic calming within the plan. And so, you know, there probably some we have those traffic calming curbs that we've implemented in and around the community. We could probably use some of those in a couple locations on Kendall Avenue. Maybe it's some of the crosswalks to kind of heighten awareness and narrow the street in those locations. We could look at four-way stops, say at Forest Hall. But ultimately, it'd be better to look at the street as a whole and come up with a fulsome traffic calming plan for the street. And that's what they do elsewhere in the valley and around the province, right? They don't just look at little quick fixes. They look at what's the ultimate design for that street. So And same with the entrance to Camp Road. I think there's something we can do to mitigate people who are going down the street instead of turning left to Comox Lake, make them more aware that, you know, it's a 30K zone, and create that narrowing so it slows traffic down. So there are some funds remaining in the 2024 budget. There's $8,000 still remaining in the solar power traffic infrastructure, and there's some traffic calming project funds of around $10,000 remaining. So really staff is seeking council approval to use those funds to undertake some of these quick fix ideas, and then we have some of the TMP projects in the budget for council consideration through our budget deliberations. So.
Questions, council? Go ahead.
I'm very sad to see that flex stakes aren't part of the quick fix idea here. And I'm curious why the village hasn't installed flex stakes yet on Kendall. Like, I just really don't understand the concept of not installing these as a quick fix. So I'd like to know
We
that.
actually had flex stakes on Sutton Road, and they kept getting run over, and they were actually peeling up the asphalt where they were bonded to the asphalt. So I think they work well in certain situations. I'm not sure they're the right approach for Candle Avenue, but I think narrowing the street in some locations, like at the crosswalks, where the crosswalks are mid-block and stuff like that, I think that helps slow traffic down, and it creates the pedestrian safety as well at the same time. So, but anyways, we'll consider. I think, you know, that's a consideration maybe for a longer term vision for Kendall Avenue, but again, I'm no traffic engineer, so.
Neither am I, but I've been to many communities where just in the middle of a residential street, it has one of these flex stakes. I certainly slow down so I don't hit it.
Is it in the middle of the road?
Right in the middle of the street.
Right.
I'm sure those flex stakes cost about $200.
Yeah.
The 4 screws that go in the road might get ripped up at some point, but that will stop people's cars. It stops mine. I don't know anyone who drives into those flex stakes except for maybe the yahoos ripping them down on Sutton. I really think that would help. I'll say again, flex stakes in the middle of the street wherever we need to.
Right.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
So what exactly are we proposing for Camp Road? Is
I
it
think-
more of those Calgary curbs?
I think so.
Just
Those are
narrowing
other
it?
barriers, I think, to create a real narrowing of the entrance. And
And then some additional
I
signage on
think so.
those curbs?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Good. And then you're looking at a 4-way stop at Forest Hall for now,
I think so.
and then looking at a redesign of some of those intersections and maybe roundabouts in the future once we've got properly designed roundabouts? Okay.
I think additional traffic calming too, like, you know, the bottom of Kendall Avenue and Maple Street.
Yeah.
They might need something there, right?
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I just think this is a good opportunity to get the residents used to some of these traffic calming measures as a first kick at it. So thank you very much for your work on it.
Yeah. I was just going to say it would be great to increase the signage. I know you know this. I'm just going to say it again because to say up for camp, to say 30 kilometers, no exit, and maybe local traffic only or something, to just stop let's go to the lake this way, but you can't. I think that would help a lot. And I think the stop sign in Egremont will help a lot because I think that means most of the intersections now have stop signs.
Forest Hall.
Forest
yeah.
Hall.
Forest Hall doesn't, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that would be helpful. And then in the future, if we can lose the stop signs and do roundabouts, if that's the way, or I don't know. I don't know.
Would be my
works
hope
better.
at some point.
I also appreciate it. I think it's important for us to recognize, particularly that Joel is out there all the time watching traffic and talking to people about their traffic issues, and that we appreciate that engagement that he's doing, and also the long list of traffic calming measures we have done, particularly on Kendall, but also elsewhere in the village to try and manage speed and create different expectations of how we travel through the community, because I think that's a big part of it, is just being like, no, we're just gonna slow down and be safe. So thank you for that. I think there's a recommendation there, council.
I'll move that council direct staff to use the remaining $18,000 in funds from the existing 2024 traffic project budgets towards some traffic calming quick fix ideas for Dunsmuir Avenue Gateway treatment and for Kendall Avenue, including four-way stops and traffic calming curbs.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? And none opposed? That's
Rob.
carried.
Thank you, council.
Thanks, Rob. Next up is Annie with Purchasing Management Services Policy Spending Authority update.
Hello, Mayor and Council. So the purpose of this report is to present the proposed changes to the Appendix A, Schedule of Signing Authority of the Purchasing Management Services Policy, to reflect the new and modified position created over the last few years and propose increase to some commitment authority threshold as well. The existing policy has been adopted in 2016, and some amendments were approved in 2017. Since then, the village organizational structure has evolved, and some new position, and some with new position and some position modified. The general spending amounts have also increased the general spending amounts have also increased significantly over the last several years. Sorry. As well as the number of actual transactions that is also increasing with the village growing. Proposed changes include Proposed changes includes the addition of new and modified positions such as supervisors and directors, and small increase for petty cash reimbursement and commitment increase for some position as presented in attachment 1 to this report. No change were made to the maximum commitment for the CAO, so any commitments over $200,000 must still be considered and approved by council. Commitment between $50,000 and $200,000 will continue to be reported to council via the quarterly financial update. So tonight, staff recommend council to amend the Appendix A, Schedule of Signing Authority of the Purchasing Management Services Policy as presented in this report.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Questions?
Straightforward.
Yep.
All right. Since purchasing is a recent passion of mine, I will. I move the council amend the Appendix A Schedule of Signing Authority of the Purchasing Management Services Policy number 3.3 as presented.
Second.
Thank you. And all in favor? None opposed? That is carried. Next up is Municipal Finance Authority financing for 2024 vehicle purchase.
So that's me again. Again, that's another housekeeping report. So the purpose of this report is to seek council approval for the short-term borrowing of the replacement of the facility van with an electric vehicle. Council approved this purchase for an amount of $80,000 in the 2024 financial plan, with $26,000 funded from the local government climate action program, and the remaining $54,000 funded through the Municipal Financial Authority Equipment Financing Program. The village funds the regular replacement of its vehicle fleet and equipment by borrowing through MFA, which requires the council resolution approving the short-term borrowing. And one thing to note is the purchase of this van was eligible for a rebate of $10,000 under the provincial Clean BC Go Electric program. So now staff is recommending that council approve the short-term borrowing from the MFA through the equipment financing program for an amount of $54,000 for the purchase of an electric cargo van with a short-term, with a 5-year term.
Thank you. Questions?
No, this is great. We're going electric. This, happy to see.
Never buy gas again. Just for those two. Yes, thank you for that. And also, anyone who's listening who may have posted on Facebook before, here's your answer to the question around the electric trucks purchase. There's a recommendation there.
I'll move the council approve the short-term borrowing from the Municipal Finance Authority through the Equipment Financing Program for an amount of $54,000 for the purchase of an electric cargo van for a 5-year term that must be repaid in 5 years.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? No. That's carried. Parks and Facilities Conduct and Compliance Policy. Now you're making me talk fast. Hello, Ryan.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Village of Cumberland, Parks and Facilities Code of Conduct and Compliance Policy. So 3 years ago, Recreation staff had developed an informal code of conduct, and we created some posters, put them up at our facilities. That informal policy was presented to Council last year during a closed session regarding an enforcement issue. At that time, staff was directed to report back to a public meeting with a formal code of conduct for council consideration, and that's what this is all about. So the Parks and Facilities Conduct and Compliance Policy being presented this evening, we've kind of broadened it, so it's designed to not just apply to Parks and Recreation, which is what that initial one was. It's designed to apply more broadly to all Village of Cumberland parks and facilities, essentially anywhere where staff and public could interact. It's also broadened, but it's also simplified. So it essentially, the code of conduct in the policy as presented, it covers 7 general themes, which are responsibility for actions. So essentially everybody needs to be responsible for how they behave. Appropriate use. So parks and facilities should be used in accordance with their intended purpose. Respectful treatment, treat everyone with respect and courtesy. Safety and enjoyment, which essentially means don't behave in a way that's going to negatively affect the safety or enjoyment of yourself or others. Prohibition of weapons, which hopefully is self-explanatory. Self-management, essentially if you can't control your actions, you can't take responsibility for your own actions, then you should leave. And then consequences for violations. So the policy lays out some guidelines for disciplinary action that could be taken. So those guidelines for discipline, they're all based on the severity of the infraction. The policy, as it's presented, also creates a mechanism by which any patron could appeal a disciplinary action by reaching out to a director or the CIO. The policy has been shared among the village's directors and managers. We feel that it sets a reasonable standard for behavior, and it'll help promote safety and respect in our parks and facilities. And with that, I'll put it out to you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
Does this mean we can open the sauna back up? No, sorry.
Are we still talking about the sauna? That's a whole
I'm
new
just kidding.
policy.
No, it's a very well written policy, and I think it's been needed for some time. So most of the people are excellent in there, but
Absolutely.
it's good to have that framework in case you do run into something in the future. So thank you.
No, this looks great, Ryan. Thank you. These signs that these are going to go up at recreation facilities, are they also going to go up at public parks or other?
We're essentially leaving it up to kind of staff discretion in each department right now. The idea is that this code is going to apply to everybody, and then from that code, for example, we've got our recreation code of conduct. Our posters are likely going to remain the same. Each of those more specific points can be sort of related back to one of the broader themes in the code. And the idea is that each department could do the same if they choose.
Awesome. Thank you.
The municipal office has posters up there as well. That's right.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you for this.
Thank you so much.
There's a recommendation there.
I'll move the council approve policy number 15.1 Parks and Facilities Conduct and Compliance.
Second.
Is that
In favor?
approve?
That's it.
Approve is just
That's good.
gotcha. Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
And that's also carried unanimously. Thanks, Ryan. And 2024 by-election results. I think, Rachel, you are on this.
Thank you. This is a report to council just summarizing the by-election on September 21st, and the results, we had 732 ballots cast, which is about a 21% voter turnout, which is fair for a by-election. The breakdown of each day, the advance voting and general voting are in the report. Candidate Nick Ward received 535 of those votes and was elected. And I'd also like to mention that election materials are available for public inspection until October 23rd at the village office. And that includes the voting books and the declarations and that sort of thing that took place on voting day. And I'll just close quickly that the new councillor will make their oath of office at a special meeting of council next Monday, October 7th at 5 o'clock. And everyone in the community is welcome to come to that meeting. It will be fairly brief because council will roll into their budget meeting at 5:30. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to thank everyone who got to know their candidates and the people who spontaneously volunteered to hold an all candidates meeting, and the candidates themselves for stepping forward. It's not an easy thing to do, and so we really appreciate that and encourage those people who are not going to sit at the table to find other ways to continue to engage with council in our very lightly attended engagement sessions generally. Budget's coming up, so that's a really big one to get to know how your municipality operates and where our money goes and how we make decisions. So that's all coming up. And yeah.
I'll move the council receive the 2024 by-election results report.
Second.
All in favor? That's unanimous. Okay, development variance permit application 4724 Cumberland Road. Come on up, Seamus. We get Seamus and Courtney.
All right.
It's our fire hall.
Yeah. So, good evening, Mayor and Council. So the purpose of this report is to request a council decision on development variance permit 2024-05 DV for 4724 Cumberland Road, the fire hall. The variance is to increase the maximum height of an accessory structure within the PA1 Public Assembly Institutional Zone from 4.5 meters to 5.3 meters to construct a training facility for the village's fire department. So for background, the fire department is required to undertake training exercises which comply with national fire certification standards. And in recent years, the fire department has simply used the training facilities of other fire services in the Comox Valley. However, in recent years, scheduling around host departments' needs has proven challenging, and as such, the fire department wishes to establish their own training facility at the fire hall. So the facility is to comprise of 3 storage containers with 1 stacked on top in order to emulate a single-family dwelling. Now, just for background and understanding, the zoning bylaw does ban shipping containers from being used for storage purposes. However, once you start cutting holes and doors into them, they function more as a structure. So as such, the zoning bylaw doesn't comment on using items that have metal storage containers for structures, but if it was being used for storage, then that would not be permitted. But if it's being retrofitted, we consider it a structure. And of course, it was a time of building permit is when we determined that we did need to do a variance, just again, based on the modular nature of this structure. So in the zone, the maximum height for accessory structures is 4.5 meters, and it's appropriate for something like an accessory storage building, shop, garage. However, the fire department does require a building or structure that emulates a single family home in the community. So the requested variance is simply to provide a structure that works and simulates actual real life conditions. And it's not unprecedented, of course, to have a fire training facility co-located at fire halls. While it'd be preferable to have it away from a residential neighborhood, other village lands were determined to not be suitable and, of course, have more time and costs involved in establishing those sites. So fire hall was determined to be the best site for the facility. Now, while the land, it's worth noting, too, that the land behind the fire hall is designated in the future OCP as being potentially for future medium density, and of course there is a surrounding residential neighborhood. So the structure is somewhat visible from these areas, and those more multifamily, should it occur, will have views into the training center. Now, that being said, the siting of the training center is towards the center of the property, which does provide some buffering from the residential and the institutional use. And in the coming years, the fire department intends on installing a good neighbor fence around the property to help screen views into this training facility. So while it is visible, there are plans to help it make sure it does integrate quite well into the area. Well, and in the event that there are future expansions planned, and if it does get taller, then of course an additional variance will be required, and we can have those discussions should that occur. But overall, staff support the variance as it does provide the fire department to have a facility to meet their needs while not being too intrusive to the nearby residential neighborhoods. And as of 2 p.m. today, the public comment deadline, no comments were received to staff. Thank you.
Thanks, Seamus. Questions, comments?
Just one. Looking at the picture, is this already built?
It's pre-staged, so everything's been there, and they're just waiting a building permit to finish kitting it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. We're not following the age-old practice of build it first and ask permission later. Okay, good. Yeah, no. One other question. This wasn't a minor variance, and so this came before us because it's neither a minor variance or because it's on village property, and we haven't seen a variance in a long time. I'm just wondering why this one is here.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So the procedures bylaw lists criteria for myself to determine if it's a minor variance. And in this case, balancing all of those criteria, this was a unique use, a fire training facility. So it was, for me, based on this not being just maybe a minor height variance for a house or a typical use, because it was this really unusual use, determined to bring this to council.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I like that, and I think it shows a bit more transparency, particularly since we're the village. So thank you for bringing it towards us here.
I'm just, did I read somewhere, or maybe it's in the next one for the grant, that there's a third container eventually to go on top to make it like a 3-story building?
That is in the next
in
report,
the-
and it's a possible future,
Yeah.
something that they're thinking about for the future. is
Okay,
what it-
so that we would come back again for a variance, or,
That's correct, yeah. We'll do it.
Okay.
If it's going on top, then it'll likely trigger another variance, but
Yeah.
once a formal application and review comes in, we'll go from there. But
okay,
Yeah.
so then my question is, are there like flames shooting out of the thing? And, no? Mike's
yeah.
shaking his head at me. So, like, what
Yeah,
does this look like?
I can try and tackle that one. And I know just from working with the fire department, everything's contained inside the building. So the gas props, the whole thing is run by natural gas. And from what I've been advised, the fire is actually happening inside the building because it's simulating that there's a fire inside and we have to go in and start rescuing people. So how to navigate those situations.
Okay, and it also said that there's no smoke. It just burns off cleanly, so.
That's
it's
correct.
not
That's
gonna terrify everyone around them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the perk of the natural gas is it just burns a bit cleaner.
Okay, great. Thank you. So there's a recommendation there.
I move that council approve the development variance permit 2024-05 DV for the property described as Lot 1, District Lot 24, Nelson District Plan, EPP 59401, which is 4724 Cumberland Road.
I'll second.
And all in favor? None opposed. So next up is grant application for volunteer and composite fire department equipment and training.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Seamus.
Seamus. Are you speaking to this, Mike?
Evening, Mayor and Council. So we're asked again to finish off this facility, or not to finish it off actually, but there's a 5-year grants out for doing this kind of training facility, and I think every department on Vancouver Island is doing the same thing. And so there's another grant opportunity we'd like to apply for to keep our system going. You know, this is it's very important to the training and to the residents of Cumberland because this makes our fire department more valuable, makes the firemen more confident, makes safer for the residents that we can do this training. And we do it often with our own training facility, where we have to go somewhere else, we do it once a year. Here we can do it 6, 10 times a year if we want. So the fire commissioner a few years back has decided that the fire departments need this kind of thing. We need to keep up these skills, and that's the purpose of the training facility. And we're trying to do it as best facilities we can for the cheapest amount we can. So we're doing lots of volunteer work. And of course, a lot of it you can't do with volunteer work, but we were waiting for this permit to go through so we could continue on with this year's grant money. So we'll be using that up fairly quickly. And so next year we'll start the next system. Not worried about the height. You know, the height deal is for ladder truck training. So I don't know when that'll happen, you know, maybe 5 years down the road or something. They might want to raise the height of that just for ladder truck training. But to now, it's just rescue, fire suppression, and keeping up with our skills of basement fires, upstairs fires, downstairs fires. And that's what we're working on right now, and rescue. So that's what the facility's hopefully, well, we're using it right now, actually. And flames, there will be contained flames, and out on the deck there will be flames, but not much bigger than a barbecue flame or a propane burner. That's where actually a little bit bigger than that, like inside a car or whatever, but they're controlled where the guys hit the car, we can shut it off immediately. And yeah, it's all safety. In our old fire department, we couldn't do any of this kind of training. So now with the new fire hall, we have the room to do this. It's a real big thing in the future. It's not going to go away. It's probably going to get more, because the work on us and the training on us is pretty substantial. So yeah, so we'd like to go again for another grant and do some more work in there. And need your permission.
Okay, thank you. Questions? I have one. I think it says somewhere in here that this is the same grant. Yep, same grant as last year.
It's increased a bit.
Okay, so it's 40,000 now instead of 30,000?
Correct.
And it does not require matching?
No.
Okay, that's good. Okay, and then in the phase 2, it says in your, under the purpose of the report, it says phase 2 is to add on units to comply with BC structure firefighter minimum training. So that's what you're applying for. Is that the structure that we just approved, or is that the other one?
The structure that you see there now that's the structure for the next few years.
Okay. Okay. There's a recommendation there.
The council support an application to UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund Volunteer Composite Fire Department Equipment and Training 2024 program for $40,000 to fund phase 2 and 3 of the training ground construction, and that council directs staff to bring forward an amendment to the adopted 2024-2028 financial plan bylaw to reflect this expenditure.
Seconder?
Second.
Thank you, council. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Next up is Remembrance Day flyby policy.
Okay, so the purpose of this report is to present a policy for council to consider approval of an annual flyby as low as 500 feet in honor of Remembrance Day. And the Cumberland Legion has a tradition of asking CFB Comox to have a flyby on November 11th. And the village does provide a letter indicating no objection to the flyby, but now staff is requesting council consider this policy to authorize that letter, provided that a request comes in from the Legion every year. And that way, we wouldn't have to bring the letter and get approval each there. So that is an alternate if council prefers that, but if council is satisfied with adopting that policy, we have that before you tonight.
Thank you. Any questions on that? Okay, there's a recommendation there.
Okay. I'll move that council approve policy 1.11 Remembrance Day flyby policy.
Second.
All in favor?
There we go.
And that is also carried unanimously. And now we're on to conference attendance 2025.
So this is a report we bring to you every year to have a discussion about your attendance at conferences next year. And your policy provides for members to attend both AVICC and UBCM, and the budget provides for that as well. And for each member to attend FCM or FCM Sustainable Communities once during the term. So one member, there's enough budget for one member to go each year. And it seems that Sustainable Communities is a bit more of a draw. For council, perhaps that only occurs every 2 years, and this coming February is the Sustainable Communities in New Brunswick. So this is an opportunity for council to have that discussion amongst the members. And if you want to go outside your policy or add budget, we ask for a council motion to do that.
Questions? Comments?
I would like to attend the Sustainable Communities Conference this year, or next year, in Fredericton.
Cool. And for myself, I'll probably be doing just UBCM next year.
I'll go to ABICC.
Cover our bases.
We're naming them all. Okay. I'm gonna go to. I'll go to ABICC and UBCM as well. It's my one per term for SC.
And AVICC, and then FCM. Yeah. So part of the, the annual conversation we have around this report is my uncomfortability with limiting what council can attend when there is budget in place. So the policy states that council has to trade a UBCM or AVICC in order to go to FCM. But if we have counselors who are not attending all those conferences, then there's budget left in our annual allocation that I would like to see dispersed, so that if there are counselors who want to go, so say two people, somebody wants to go to FCM and somebody wants to go to FCM Sustainable Communities, that if there's still budget, that we can do that. So we can always do that by coming to council for a permission, but I think generally that policy requires council to give up an so ABICC, UBCM, FCM, and FCM Sustainable Communities, maybe not Sustainable Communities so much, and I've never been to FCM. I think it's also all of those are advocacy opportunities, and we wouldn't want to have to trade up an advocacy opportunity for an educational opportunity, which is what the other ones generally seem to be. I think we want to allow counselors, as they are able, to be as educated as possible by attending these other conferences. So that's my ongoing struggle with it. And I don't know if there's an easy fix to that policy, if we could just say, instead of saying that that you have to swap, that's maybe removed and you are able, if there's, and it says if there's budget, then more could attend? Or there's not a need to swap? I don't have the wording. I didn't develop proper wording, sorry. So I guess I'm just looking for feedback from council on that. How you guys feel about that? Do we want to limit what people go to, or do we want to allow people, as long as there's budget, to attend?
I'm in favor of, as long as there's budget, allow people to attend. Seems reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, like you're saying, if one member only goes to like one event, then it frees up budget space for somebody else to pick up some of the
Yeah.
others.
Or like when Councillor Kettler was chair of CVRD, the CVRD paid her way, so
Yeah.
that freed up her budget, the budget that was allocated for her, that somebody else could potentially use, right? So those situations happen as well.
One thing I would suggest, though, is there are other conferences as you go through the year, and
Yeah.
so you probably should be thinking about, like, council members who give up other conferences should be thinking about some other stuff too before they give it up, if that's how you guys are gonna.
Yeah,
Because
like,
if you,
Right,
because
like,
if you, yeah.
I didn't go to UBCM this year, but I am going to go to Viea.
yeah.
I haven't decided yet. There's another one in November, the Housing,
Housing Central.
there's a Housing Central Conference coming up in November that I'm looking at, but haven't
Yeah.
pulled the trigger on yet. I've got some household negotiations to manage first. Yeah, so, you know, I wouldn't want to give up all of my budget to somebody else and then not be able to,
Yeah.
to do some of these smaller ones.
So I don't know, maybe it's just how we track it, like maybe that's the,
But in principle, yeah.
yeah.
Like if there's extra budget, then in principle, I'm fine with.
So is there a way for us to do that? How do we need to change the policy to allow that to happen without us having to have accounts? Because if something comes up, like if he decides that he can go and we don't have a council meeting before Housing Central, like how do we?
I think in that scenario, it would be Council Terrian's prerogative because
Because he's already giving up
giving
UBCM.
up UBCM, so there's your own allocation of funding. It's just using
Yeah.
funds from other council members really deserves a discussion amongst members, I think,
Right.
to make those decisions.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That makes sense. And I think we have feedback from our newest counselor as well on attendance?
I did not hear back from.
Okay. Okay, so that's an unknown as well. All right, there's a recommendation there. Oh, we're just receiving that. We're just receiving that
Okay,
report.
move receipt.
Giving our-
Second.
Did Mayor Brown, did you
Oh, I
indicate?
didn't say anything, no.
Just need to start to make travel arrangements now
Yes, that's right.
to.
So, yeah, so I'll go to AVICC and UBCM. And that's all I really know right now, I think.
Thank you.
I have some interest in FCM because I've never been, but I also thought about it. Okay, so now where are we? We're on
You're okay with the
receiving the conference.
receiving that one? Yeah.
Yeah.
Receipts.
Everyone's agreeable to that?
Yeah. So someone needs to move receipt.
Oh, move receipt.
Second.
Thank you.
There we go.
And now we can say all in favor.
There we go.
And move on. Any opposed?
No.
No, okay. Draft bylaw 1215, Lot A, Ulverston. Come on up, Courtney.
right. So this application is to amend the zoning bylaw to permit a mixed-use development including residential and commercial on a 2.67 hectare vacant lot on Ulverston Avenue close to Royston Road. The lot is designated in the OCP as mixed use. The proposal is for a mix of townhouses and ground-level commercial with apartments above, to a maximum height of 4 stories for the apartments. The concept plan provided includes approximately 180 apartments and 4 townhouses. At least 50% of the apartment units would be rental, and 10% of those would be rented at below market rates for 10 years, and this would be secured through covenant. The developer will also provide a financial contribution to the Affordable Housing Reserve of $36,700. A riparian area runs through the southern portion of the lot. Development cannot occur within this area. The historic Wellington Colliery Railway also passes through the lot, and a park would be dedicated to protect this corridor, with the developer required to construct a public trail with interpretive signage. The park would include the riparian area, adjacent to the railway trail, and a stand of mature trees. So on the process on this application so far. The applicant hosted a public information on March 8th, 2024. After this public information meeting, the developer then proceeded to undertake the required background studies. This is required by the village as part of our development approval information bylaw. The developer undertook studies including a riparian area assessment, arborist report that identified and mapped healthy and mature trees on the property, geotechnical report, preliminary servicing review, community impact assessment, and traffic and parking assessment. After all these studies were completed, the concept plan did change as the buildable area was reduced and the underground parking was found to be impractical. Therefore, with that reduction to the buildable area, there was an increase in the number of apartment units and decrease in the townhouse units. So a few words on the housing need. The housing needs report received by council tonight shows that the gap between what can be afforded by the median income and the median purchase price continues to widen. And the housing needs report recommends several things. I'll pull out one of them. As a small but rapidly growing urban area, Cumberland's focus will be to provide a diversity of housing, especially rental apartments, secondary suites, and accessory dwelling units, condominiums, and townhouses, to meet the needs of its residents at all stages of their life. Although we receive public comments with concern about this density of development, we also hear from people who are concerned their young adult children or aging parents will need to leave Cumberland to find a suitable place to live as they move from one life stage to another. And we hear from business owners that housing suitable for workers is desperately needed. This development could add to the need for diversity of housing as identified in the housing needs report and from these public comments. Much of Cumberland's single-family neighborhoods will be pre-zoned to allow up to 4 units in the coming months, as required by new provincial rules. Because of its size and location, this particular lot to be rezoned is uniquely positioned to locate apartments, whereas townhouses will be allowed by right on hundreds of lots in Cumberland shortly. And this, on a slightly different note, this is primarily a market housing development, with at least 50% of the apartments to be purpose-built rental. The affordable housing component of 10% for 10 years, plus the financial contribution to the Affordable Housing Reserve, is an important community benefit. The Housing Needs Report also identified a need for deeply subsidized housing, but we do not typically rely on the private market to deliver a significant number of below-market rental units. We don't expect each individual development either to cover the full range of housing needs. And just as a side note, concurrent to working on this rezoning application, staff is also working towards a BC Housing grant for a building with higher proportion of below-market rentals in the village for a 50-year term at a site on 2nd Street, where a village holds a lease to the land. And a few words on fit with the neighborhood, which was mentioned in some of the public comments. This lot has many positive characteristics for this type of development. It is within 15-minute walk to the village center and close to the bus route. The riparian area to the south and the mature trees that will be retained within it provides a buffer to homes to the south along Royston Road. To the west, where there are also homes, the buildings on this property would be set back from the property line, and this is required in the development permit area guidelines to buffer to adjacent land uses. And then as well, I'll mention again with the new provincial rules requiring pre-zoning for single residential lots for up to 4 units, the residential lots to the south and the west could be developed with townhouses in the future without rezoning. So that would be the pre-zoning that's required by the province. And lastly, I'll talk about the development approval process, including what would be in the new zone as drafted and what would come back to council with a future development permit application. So the draft zone presented to you today creates a new zone called Mixed Use Residential 2. We drafted this zone such that it could be applied to other lots in the future if someone were to make a rezoning application for a mixed-use development. For this specific development on Ulverston, through the use of covenants, we would secure community amenities specific to this application, including the park dedication, trail construction, Ulverston Avenue frontage upgrades, contribution to Affordable Housing Reserve Fund, and the 50% rental tenure. If the zoning bylaw is adopted, the next step is a development permit application under Development Permit Area Number 8 Mixed Use. This development permit is approved by council. It cannot be delegated to staff and is required before subdivision, land alteration, or construction. The development permit is required before subdivision because it is mixed use. If it was 100% only residential, which isn't supported by the OCP in this location, then development permit is not required for subdivision. But in this case, because it's mixed use, the development permit is needed before the subdivision can be approved. And then, of course, the development permit also covers the landscaping, site design, outdoor amenity areas, architectural features, etc. So some people have asked, well, there have been a lot of comments about the details of site design, the buildings themselves, the outdoor spaces, etc. And when does this get figured out? So this is through development permit application, and we specifically do not require the development permit application at the same time as the rezoning for a few reasons. The rezoning is not time limited. So the zoning is in place indefinitely until it's changed by council by another bylaw amendment. A development permit, by contrast, expires after 2 years if construction doesn't commence. So if council was to support a rezoning combined with a development permit, so it would be based on a specific detailed design covered in the development permit, the development permit then could expire with the rezoning in place. And this could create a problematic situation if council or community members' approval of the zoning was tied to the details in the development permit. A few years later, a new owner comes in with a different proposal that meets the zoning but looks different from the different development permit, and it's a difficult situation that people find themselves in. So the current best practice for this type of development is to rezone first, use covenants to secure what cannot be secured through the development permit, and then have the zoning stand on its own. Then the development permit refines the site plan, the outdoor space, the landscaping, the architectural details. So you have a draft zoning amendment before you. The recommendation is to refer this to the Homelessness and Affordable Housing Committee, Comox First Nation, and the School District for comment. There's also a recommendation for council to require the applicant to hold a second public information meeting, as you have the option to do per the Development Application Procedures Bylaw. Thank you.
Thanks, Courtney. Questions, council?
I'll let these two go first. I've got a bunch. Go ahead. See if
Start her up, Troy.
Oh,
I don't know
boy.
where to
All
begin
right.
here.
Okay, so this site obviously doesn't meet DPA, or the proposal that we've got so far obviously doesn't meet DPA 8 guidelines. Right, there's no plazas, there's no outdoor spaces, it falls short of that. So it's hard, and I think the community is having a hard time figuring out what we're actually voting on here, because we don't have a plan that meets the DPA guidelines. So with the rezoning that's coming up, or I'm sorry, with the public engagement that's coming up, I would hope to see a more detailed drawing of what this is going to look like at the end so that the public does have an idea of what they're commenting on. And that would apply also to the recommendations to send this back to committees. If they're, sending this in its current form with this drawing, they're going to come back with no's again because they're going to look at the drawing and see these giant 4-story buildings and go like this. So there's that part of it. The next part of it is, and here's where the questions start, who are we covenanting with? It's my understanding that right now the developers are not actually the landowners. So any covenants that go on the property have to be registered with the current landowner. So I'm not understanding how this process is squared. How do we apply these covenants and then the 219 covenant when the developer doesn't actually own the land? Who are we binding?
The covenant is registered on the property title, so it is binding on whoever the owner is at any point in time.
Okay, so we have to get the current landowner to agree to those covenants then.
So we're working with the applicant, would be the future landowner, and I'm not privy to the timeline of their purchase. So that is something the applicant would have to figure out. If they are not the owners at the time the covenants need to be registered, it is up to them to get approval of the current owner to do that.
Okay. And then, but those covenants need to go on before we actually grant the rezoning.
That's correct. They would go on before adoption. It would usually be between third reading and adoption with the covenants be finalized.
Okay. And do the covenants come before council? And do we have a chance to go over the covenants and make sure that everything that we're looking for is there?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Amenities. One that comes to mind for me, I like most of what's going on. I'd, of course, like to see the whole street paved. The other one that really comes to my mind is most of the people walking from this facility are going to go through the park onto Carlisle Lane. They're going to follow Carlisle Lane. They're going to hit Royston Road, and the sidewalk ends. So I would like to see as off-site amenities a sidewalk that goes from the end of Carlisle Lane to 7th Street, because that's going to be the bulk of the foot traffic in and out of this development is going to go directly down there. And yeah, there are no sidewalks along that stretch of road at all. Personally, also, yeah, again, daycare spaces. This is all DPA 8 stuff, I guess, for outdoor spaces for daycare adjacent to the commercial zone where the daycare would be located. Need to be thought of. Parking. I hate cars. Parking takes up a lot of the lot. I personally, I don't know how the rest of the council would feel about, but I'd be willing to reduce the amount of parking if applicants were interested in starting car share co-ops and providing a number of cars for resident use, and whoever's managing the rental units also manage the sharing of the cars as a way to reduce parking. Will there be parking on Ulverston Avenue on one or both sides of the road as well? Is that going to be additional parking all the way along that stretch of road?
Afraid I don't have the answer to that at my fingertips. I can't recall the sample road cross-section we have for Alverston, but I think there's a good chance there would be street parking, but it wouldn't be to fulfill the requirement of the on-site parking.
No, I understand that,
Okay.
but that would be, that's where most of this spillover parking is going to occur, I would imagine.
I can come back to you with more information on that, but I believe it most likely would be like parallel street parking.
Okay. I mean, the bylaw itself, yeah. But again, like I say, I think a more detailed plan of what we're actually gonna get is gonna be really useful for the committees.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Courtney.
All right. As we all know, the rezoning is when we hold all the cards, and I just think we could do a little better just for the form and character within that neighborhood. And I think having a second public hearing is a good opportunity for the developer to hear more from that community. This stands in, not that I'm subscribing to Architectural Digest magazine, but evokes images of stark Soviet brutalism in my mind. And things like setbacks, or stepped building heights, might be some way to alleviate that. I do appreciate that they're trying to offer a high degree of density within that neighborhood. I just feel there could be a better form and character to it. And I also think we could try and do better than just 10% for 10 years. Like, I think that really, in 10 years, things aren't going to get easier, and even our own plans look well beyond the 10-year mark, and we're going to end up in a situation where everything here is at market value in 10 years. So I think we can do a little better in negotiating on that. I do like the park dedication from that. However, I don't think that's sufficient enough to completely ignore any kind of shared outdoor space that the developer could offer here on top of it. So, thank you.
Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, I agree with my council mates. I have some issues with the connectivity, the density, the height. Obviously, the community is mostly outraged at the volume of this development. It's been as many letters for this as anything, I think, to this point. They're all very detailed. A lot of people have taken a lot of time to really think about this, and a lot of people aren't enjoying what they're seeing. And I agree with that. Yeah, I think the footprint's too heavy for there. I know that we need all the rental housing that we can, and the diversity that we need, but which I think this answers a lot of, but I just think it's too big. And yeah, can we require them to have a second meeting without passing any of this stuff? I don't think the gap is being met between our community and the developers at this point. So just like to see that gap get closer.
Yeah, so I think I'll start with what I appreciate about this application, the commercial space. We know we need more commercial space. I like having the opportunity to have commercial in that area. I think it's well suited, that mix. It would be good, it would be helpful if they were, I think the commercial zones and opportunities we have in the downtown core are quite small, and we're needing some slightly larger. So not large, but that in-between mix, I think we are missing. That could be helpful out there, particularly for like the fitness stuff and the daycares and that sort of thing. I appreciate that there's no new gas hookups. I appreciate the rentals. I understand there are 60 units of rental, and so we would get 6 affordable units. So I don't think that's enough. I would like to see more. I'd like to see I'd like to see one 4-story building that is entirely rentals, and more of the townhouses or row housing or something that is I think this development goes from village scale to city scale in too big a jump. And I just don't think Cumberland's there. I don't think our residents are there. I don't think council's there. And I don't think it's where we want to end up being. I think this, the scale of the density, I don't know, it's hard for me to imagine density in like 1.0 or 1.7 FAR. But I know that one of the APC members did a calculation and looked at the size of the 84 townhomes in Coal Valley Estates, and that is currently sitting on a similar footprint to what this would be, which is 184 units all told. So that's a massive jump. If that's our most dense development in the village, which I'm pretty sure it is, that's a huge leap to double that, essentially, in one development. And I think, like row housing or townhomes give better balance in terms of land cover and scale and just visual appeal and all of that. And so there's that. I also agree with the sidewalk. I did go and have a look today at the site, and I appreciate the plan to retain those trees, because I think it will really help mitigate the impact of the development on the neighborhood. And at the same time, I want us to, and it's not just specific to this development, but I want us to distinguish between areas on lots that are purchased for development that are undevelopable and parkland. I don't think the two should be confounded. So if you can't build because there's a ravine or a swamp or a river or a setback, then that's not included in your park dedication. Your park dedication is an entirely different thing, and it is for park use. It's not, so right now we're considering turning an ecosystem with endangered species in it into a park, which is going to, with 200 people living right next, well, all the people that live around there, which is a lot more than 180 units and all the other neighborhoods, and putting them all through that space. So what's that going to do to the population of creatures that are living there, especially the endangered ones, or one, I don't know if there's more. There was a mention of a heron rookery. I didn't see any evidence of that in there, but we would want to confirm that that's not actually a thing. And yeah, and then the Elverston, the access to Elverston, I think is, is going to end up being challenging, because there's a lot of parking that's already happening along Elverston for those businesses that are there. And that's not their property. That's fine. It's fair game. But that, if we're thinking, oh, we won't need that much parking because people park on the street, or they can use the easements like everybody else does in town, that is already limited by those businesses. So yeah, I'm reluctant to put the developer in a position of taking this out to committees when I don't think it's what the community is ready for, and I don't think it's what council's ready for. I'd like them to give it another go and see if we can get a different sort of scale that's somewhere between, village scale and urban density, is my feeling. There's two recommendations there. One is to refer, and the other is to require a second public information meeting. And again, like my fellow counselor said, I'm not sure the second information meeting is going to go any better than the first, because the drawings just aren't, the community doesn't have the detail they need to see. They need to imagine what this is gonna look like. And again, I think it's just the wrong scale still. So that's my thoughts, council. There's a recommendation there.
Okay, I can take a crack at it. That I'd like to move the council refer draft zoning amendment bylaw number 1215/2024, Lot A, Plan VIP 72022 Ulverston Avenue to the Homelessness and Affordable Housing Committee, Comox First Nations and School District 71 for comment, and that council require the zoning amendment applicant for Lot A, Plan VIP 72022 Ulverston Avenue to hold a second public information meeting.
May I amend that?
Can we second it first? I think we need to second it first.
Okay, second.
Okay.
I would like it also to go back to the APC once again
Thank you,
after
sorry.
after the second public information meeting, if there are new drawings, plans. I'm not sure how exactly we word this, but
So I think.
I know if a different plan comes forward, I think the APC would like to see it again.
So this is to refer this plan in this package to those committees. Is that what we want to do? Is that the motion?
That is not what I would like to do.
So we might need a different motion, or we might need to, you're welcome to have
I'd like to.
that motion.
I
and we can kill it and then come back with
move.
something else.
I'd like to amend it to send it back to the APC after the second public hearing.
Okay.
What's our,
So we can just vote on that if you want.
I'm reluctant to, my problem is I'm reluctant to send this package to these other committees. Because again, I don't expect that this is going to be where the final product is.
So maybe I can make a suggestion that
Please.
Rachel can tell us what we need to do with the motion we have on the floor. And then, once we figure that out, then we could make a new motion that says something like, we would like staff to go back and work with the developer to come back with a plan that takes into account all of our comments and the APC's comments and bring that back to. And then I don't know whether we would just refer it to APC at that time and then
and-
refer it out or bring it back or whatever that looks like.
I feel like in one way you're right. I think the public hearing should come first, and then
Public
the
information.
public information session. If they have something new to present, then we can take that to the various committees there.
Yep, that makes
I think
more sense.
we're putting the cart before the horse by referring it out to those first.
So, do we want to withdraw the motion on the table?
I'll
Do we
withdraw
wanna
the motion on the
repeat it?
table and put that.
No? Rachel doesn't like
I
that.
think if there's no objection, I think everyone's
Yeah.
in agreement here that this isn't how you want to proceed, is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
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 I think it's acceptable to withdraw it if you all agree.
Okay.
And so-
Okay.
I'll
Yes,
withdraw that.
Courtney. Courtney wants to add something.
I might be able to help procedurally. So
Thank you.
you might recall that around this time last year, your APC bylaw, you amended your APC bylaw to kind of pre-authorize staff to refer complex development applications to the APC before they came to council. That's the only committee where that's in place. So for the Homelessness and Affordable Housing Committee, technically the way their terms of reference works is council has to see it first and then refer it. What I think you could do here is basically refer this application to the Homelessness and Affordable Housing Committee. And then what will always happen after a council meeting like this is we will, the applicant, they're here in the audience, they'll think about everything that they've heard, and we'll have a debrief with them, with staff. And if they make any changes to their proposal, their site plan, then I think that could go to the homelessness committee before council. And then we'd kind of come back to council as a package, any changes and their comments. But we sort of need your resolution, and I'd say to refer the application to the committee. And then it's not exactly what you see here. It's sort of the next phase if it changes from the applicant. And then in terms of Comox and School District 71, those referrals on the bylaw could actually they could go on the draft bylaw as we're recommending here, or they can actually go after readings if it does proceed to readings. So that can wait. But you would want to do, as you know, the committees earlier.
Yeah. Okay. So does anybody want to take a crack at that motion, or do you want me to try and do that?
So we definitely want to keep the second portion of that motion in there.
Okay, so can we do it like this? I'll move that council require the zoning amendment applicant for Lot A planned VIP 72022 Alverston Avenue to hold a second public information meeting, and that subsequently council refer the draft zoning amendment bylaw 12/15/2024 Lot A planned VIP 72022 Alverston Avenue to the Homelessness and Affordable Housing Committee, Comox First Nation, School District 71, and the Advisory Planning Commission for comment.
I think we want to leave off the Comox First Nation NSD 71 until we get through the APC and the info session and the homelessness.
Yeah.
So refer to homelessness and affordability, APC, and info session, but not the other two.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Okay.
Yep.
But in the other order, the public information hearing, and then refer it subsequent to that.
Okay, so, but he's read this, he's got the particular Lot A plan, blah, 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 that's good? Or that's too specific, or do we want just this because we don't want this particular application going.
Well-
We want an amended application, because if this is what it is, this is not, we don't, anyway.
We don't want to send something we don't approve of.
Oh, to get approval
in
for
principle,
our-
in principle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
To get approval that we don't, There seems to be more work to happen, so we don't want.
yeah,
to
let's
send
not
it
have the developer spending more money on something we don't want to look like this.
So this is a public information meeting hosted by the applicant, so I think they do have the latitude to present things that are not in front of you tonight, to make
Okay.
changes before the public information meeting, maybe provide additional information. So I don't think the resolution is problematic.
Okay, great. So let's just make sure Rachel has that right, because we did a lot of talking there.
So that council require the zoning amendment application? Is that right?
Mhm.
For Lot A, Alverston Avenue, to hold a second public information meeting, and that council refer the draft zoning bylaw. Are we referring to the bylaw or the application, sorry? Zoning amendment bylaw to the Homelessness and Affordable Housing Committee and Advisory Planning Commission.
We could say the application instead of the draft.
Yeah, let's do the application.
The application?
Okay, yep.
Okay, I'll second that.
All in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And thanks for being here and waiting all that time. Okay. Thanks for your help on that, Courtney. So next up is BC Hydro Public Electric Vehicle Fast Charging Program.
Good evening again, and again in Joel's absence, here to present a Coles Notes version of his report. It's not a big report, but But BC Hydro currently has a number of level 2, level 3 charges around the province. And we've had some initial discussions with Hydro on the potential of installing chargers, EV chargers on 6th Street, adjacent to Village Park. They meet objectives like high value local amenity and close to downtown core, and of course close to their electrical infrastructure. And of course these EV charging stations are supported and recommendations out of the Transportation Master Plan and the Climate Action Plan. So we don't have any details, and at this point it's very preliminary. There'll be, my understanding is more work next year, but they wanted to start on identifying, I guess, any potential areas within the community, and this is what they've come up with. So.
And so that, sorry, I'm going to jump in with a quick question. It says 8 chargers, but it's 4 stations. Yeah?
I think it's 8. 4 of them, and I'm just trying to look at the legend. 4 of them are level 2. 4 of them are level 3. That's what I see.
I only see 4 of those, level 3 at 7.
Yeah, based on the map that's attached to the report, it shows, I think, 4 level 2s. So the fast chargers are in blue, and the
Yeah,
level
the level
2s
are the little
are in black.
triangles. But and then there's 2 others, and then the green one, which is 7. Oh no, there's one of the other, oh no, those are kiosks.
No, those
Yeah.
are kiosks, those aren't chargers.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's 2 chargers that come out of one machine. So I'm thinking it just looks like a lot of space on there. But that's where the electrical capacity is. So,
And it's a location where, I mean, we initially had,
There's
I think, a
room.
discussion
I
with
think it's
them
great.
about parking on the front of our Dunsmuir, the front of Village Park, but they're angled parking stalls and they don't work.
yeah,
So.
yeah.
Yeah, it's not a lot of great locations for
No.
this type of. It's challenging.
We're pretty squishy here in the village. Yep.
That seems like as good as you could get, really.
Yeah. And it's great. People will park down there and wander up or go to the park or whatever.
How close is that to the entrance to the field?
It is. Well, it's just
I think it's just below
just
there.
south of the lane there. You can kind of see, and I think it's just above it because you've got the splash park and then the Centennial
It's gonna
Building.
be kind of it's gonna be kind of on the slope, right? So but if you're doing pull-in parking on that slope, your car's gonna be on a bit of a
Bit of an angle.
bit of an angle.
It's okay.
Yeah,
Right.
probably, yep.
Yep.
Through the mayor. So at this stage, we're just looking for you guys to kind of let us keep working with BC Hydro, kind of so that we don't, get too far with them. But they are actually still needing to do feasibility work. So they're still at that stage, correct? And the other thing is I just want to point out that, so it's on our public infrastructure land and they own the asset. So I know the report said that, but I just wanted you to know that.
Yeah.
Just a question about that. So do we own the liability in case something goes badly, or?
I don't think so. If somebody was plugged into it, it's their infrastructure, it's their liability, and of course, if we were to move forward with this and it proved it was feasible, we'd have some kind of an agreement. We'd have to review language about liability, but
Okay.
Okay. There's a recommendation there.
Move that council direct staff to undertake preliminary work to determine the feasibility of the village becoming a host partner in the BC Hydro Public EV fast charging program.
Second.
Yay, fast chargers. That's unanimous. Thank you, Rob. And Public Works Office roof
Don't go anywhere.
replacement.
So this past winter, we had a leak in the old fire chief's office. And then this spring, we had another roof leak in one of the vehicle bays. And so our building, what is Wes? The building services supervisor engaged a local roofing contractor to go up on the roof and see what kind of repairs they could do. And the gist of it is, they said, the roof's done.
Really?
Yeah. Surprise, surprise.
Shocking.
Yeah. So it's an old tar and gravel roof. I mean, it's been around a long time, and you know, speaking with the fire chief, they did some repairs a number of years ago. So it's at the end of its life. It's probably beyond the end of its life, to be honest with you. And the challenge is this roof here, from the peak to the east, all sheds onto that roof as well. So water and snow and there's a real issue with where that roof, this roof here, meets the flat roof as well. They've tried to stick some flashing up and undertake some repairs over the years, but yeah, it needs some love, this old fire hall roof. So we don't have a budget for it. We do have a facility asset reserve fund, which is currently sitting at $486,600, and so the recommendation of council approves moving forward with obtaining 3 quotes is to use approximately $55,000 of that reserve to try and get the roof done this fall, and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I shouldn't laugh. It's terrible. So my only question is, if the sheeting underneath is good, which is a slim chance, then it wouldn't be the full 55,000, and we'd just use, and the rest would go back into the reserve.
Correct. Yeah.
For actually building a building.
And
Yeah.
then the other side of
Yeah.
that coin is they start taking off stuff and then finding more problems and more problems. And then how,
So we,
We just put
What-
tin on top of the, like,
from the CRI,
from just
a giant tarp.
a tin. the
how
tin
much are
top.
raincoats? Yeah, I mean,
So staff took that into consideration. So we looked at the estimate. They had a contingent amount for sheeting replacement, and so we used that to come up with this 55,000.
Oh, okay.
so
So
this
there is some contingency in here for some sheeting removal, not the
Okay.
whole roof,
Yeah.
but there are some areas where it's leaked, and obviously there could be water damage or rot. We don't know what to
Yeah,
expect.
yeah,
There aren't any real obvious areas when you look from inside the building up to the ceiling, but
yeah. Oh, okay.
who knows what you discover when you strip
When you get
the old
inside
tar and
there.
gravel roof
Yeah.
off. So
Michelle, did
Through
you
the
have
mayor, I would like to say as well is like once the roof is off and they're working on it and everything, if there was an easy way to come back to council if something like that did happen, we would. But at that point, I think it would be an emergency expenditure, and we would have to figure out what projects we won't do instead, and we would report after to council, unfortunately, if something like that did happen.
Yeah.
I mean, the other option is, we could try and get through another winter. I'm just afraid with the winter they're forecasting, probably have leaks again. And
Maybe even more leaks.
and then is it turning into a staff liability issue and
potentially mold and
mold and hazardous work conditions, et cetera? Because I just hate spending money on that building. 'Cause
On any of
it's-
these buildings, really.
Yes, 'cause they're all-
But yes, yes.
Until we have a stop gap or something else feasible in place, I mean, I think you're only going to add to your liability by not spending this money. My old man always used to tell me, take care of your roof first. then the foundation will last. Anyway, and our foundation is people, so we want to make them comfortable.
Oh, that's
Wow.
nice.
Thanks. I just came up
Really
with that.
nice.
Way to bring that back around.
Thanks, Counselor.
All right, well,
Okay, so
I'll
there's a
move the-
recommendation
I'll
there.
move the council approve the expenditure of up to 55,000 for the Public Works office roof replacement to be funded through the Facility Asset Renewal Reserve, and that council direct staff to bring forward an amendment to the adopted 2024-28 financial plan bylaw to reflect this expenditure.
Second.
And then the
All in
first,
favor, all reluctantly in
need
favor
the
of,
first one as well.
This hurts.
and that's, no one's opposed. Troy?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Do we need the first? There's 3 recommendations
Oh,
there.
sorry.
I just want
Did
to
you
check,
skip one?
make sure we got them all.
I think he said them all.
Yeah, I think you said them all. Yeah.
Yep,
He's a
yep,
very
he got them
fast
all.
reader.
Thank you, council. Sorry for
Thank
the bad
you.
news again. But
Yeah, this is just part of your job. Okay, and now we have the bylaw 1214, 2024-2028 financial plan amendment bylaw coming back at us for final adoption.
Can we just read that one?
Yep.
Yeah. I'll move the council adopt the 2024-2028 financial plan amendment bylaw number 1214-2024.
Second.
All in favor? That is also unanimously carried, unanimously. Okay, new business, nothing, notice motions and announcement. Please do check the village website before attending any of these meetings, just to make sure that they are actually happening. A special council meeting for the oath of office for our new councillor and reception on October 7th at 5 p.m. from 5 p.m. till 5:30. If you come at 5:30, you get to watch the whole council meeting. Committee of the Whole budget meetings October 7th and 15th at 5:30 p.m. And unlikely, but possible, a village roundtable on October 12th at 6:30. Question period. Questions? Any questions? Any questions from the audience?
Did you say October 12th?
That's a Saturday.
Yes.
Sorry, I missed
Well, it's
that.
definitely not happening on October 12th. It's
I
probably
thought
not
I
happening
think it's
in
October
October
10th,
any-
if it's gonna happen.
Maybe. That's the Thursday?
Yeah.
Yeah. No questions? No online questions? Everybody got their emails in, I guess.
Village round.
All right, so there's a motion to move to closed.
Second.
All in favor for that? Thank you.